Welcome back. This frigid storm is unfortunately bringing out the worst in people. New York Governor Kathy Hochul says state police are getting reports of snow looting. Hochul says there's been a few calls in Buffalo and other communities in western New York. One business had its windows smashed in, while a 7-Eleven was also vandalized. Let's welcome in Thane Rosenbaum, a distinguished professor at Touro University, for reaction to this. And Thane, you hear about looting after hurricanes, but this is a first. And, I've heard of snow angels, but now we've got snow looters. This is insane.
I love that image, Rob. Yes. Look, we're living through a heightened period of vulnerability and a general sense of lawlessness. We shouldn't be surprised, right? There's spiking crime rates and cashless bail, so there's no consequences to criminals, and they know that. And they surely suspect that there's even fewer consequences during a blizzard because they're going to be much more difficult to catch, and all the other portions of the city are dealing with other problems. So it's not surprising. It's just, certainly Christina is way too young to remember the 1970s, but surely in New York, there was just a general sense of menace. There was the Bronx is Burning and Son of Sam, and things that sound appalling to us, like breaking into people's homes during a blizzard to take advantage of, these natural forces, are appalling. But it seems to be the consistent with the general tone of how we're living today anyway.
Well, it's so true, and you brought up a good point, especially in places like New York and other areas where there's no cash bail. Criminals fear nothing, right? It's the opposite of Les Mis. You steal a loaf of bread, you go to jail for a life in that play. But, of course, here in New York, you can steal whatever you want, and you're going to be back out, especially if you needed a TV on Sunday with all the NFL games. That's a perfect excuse, right?
Yeah, Rob. And also, I know this sort of thing just drives Donald Trump supporters mad because they think it just seems like anarchy in the streets only matter on January 6th, which was appalling. And every one of the 900 people that have been arrested will be punished, should be punished. But it does seem like there's a different kind of anarchy on the street, Rob, that no one seems all that interested in. Media doesn't cover it as widely. So we're seeing, yes, January 6th, but there's looting and cash and grab, rioting. And we saw, of course, the torching of police cars and police precincts. And this has an effect on people. Remember the broken window strategy of crime fighting of the 1990s, which says go after the little crimes and then it'll reduce the temptation of the larger crimes. But what we have now, Rob, is just an overwhelming amount of large crimes. And the crimes are soaring, and it gives us a general sense of vulnerability and lawlessness.
You wonder, too, Buffalo is normally pretty good in the bad weather. You wonder if local officials, not just in Buffalo, but in other areas that got hammered, if they were ready, if they were prepared enough for these storms.
Rob, that's a good question. But let me tell you something about New Yorkers. I think you're one, too. People in Buffalo always thought they were the best kept secret in the country. Right. They always said, this is a great place to live, great community, great people. Yes, the weather's harsh, but we look out for each other, and we now have the Buffalo Bills. So I think it's also a problem that when people in Buffalo think of violence, they think of New York City. They don't think of Buffalo. But remember, wasn't it recently there was a mass shooting at a grocery store? And now we're seeing the smash and grab looting that's taking place in the aftermath of a blizzard. If this is happening in Buffalo, Rob, we're in trouble.
And Rochester has the highest per capita murder rate in America. And it's like that all over New York and their cities. Let's go to another troubling trend, actually. Believe it or not, attacks on power stations. This is, you don't think about this, but there was a fourth power substation attacked in Washington. Police say 3 others were vandalized, then knocked out power to even more homes after they gained access to this fourth one. There's no suspects yet, at least in custody. 14,000 people are without power. Listen to this about the attacks.
All three happened in the middle of the night on Christmas Day, causing power outages. Nothing was stolen from either or any of those facilities, so there's a good possibility they are related. We're going to be investigating to see if this was coordinated by a specific group or people. We are aware of other incidents that occurred in Oregon and southern Washington, as well as the incidents from North Carolina earlier in this winter time. So that's what we're looking into.
Yeah, it's amazing because in North Carolina, that had thousands of people without power as well. What is happening? Why is this happening? And by the way, how could this be prevented?
Well, one thing, Rob, is I think the question is, it appears that this was coordinated. It would be very unlikely that this is sort of random improvised acts. Remember, unlike the scenario you and I just talked about in Buffalo, it doesn't have the same incentive, right? It's not like smash and grab, take jewelry, go get an iPad, and then run off, to another Walgreens and do the same thing, or go into a family home and steal their jewelry. This has a very different set of incentives and always raise the questions of national security. So we're always interested in certain kinds of crime. Like, for instance, it does seem like we have a real misplaced priorities. We're focusing on gender-neutral bathrooms and pronouns, and beheading statues and renaming public schools, and being told that white supremacy is by far the worst thing that's happening. And that just doesn't add up, given the two stories you've just identified this morning. When you hear those two things, they don't seem to have anything to do with white supremacy. And when it comes to the power grid, Rob, you're talking about national security. This is a very different level of criminal activity. And when we talk about, Russia meddling in our elections, that's one kind of meddling. But is this, the Chinese or Russians or Iranians or North Koreans meddling with our power grid? Because if you really want to destabilize the United States, the best way to do it is through infrastructure. And that's what's really of great concern with these power grids and energy companies.
And you got to believe those countries are looking at how easy it is to do, how they get away with it, and they're planning their own in the future if they need to. So Thane Rosenbaum, appreciate your support coming on today on this day after Christmas.
Anytime for you, Rob and Christina. I'm here for you.
All right. Thank you very much.
And an